You never really know who someone is until the truth breaks through the silence they've been forced to live in. In a world where appearances deceive and power often disguises cruelty, a boy no one believed in was sentenced not just by the law, but by prejudice itself. But what happens when the very system that tried to bury him discovers the one thing it never expected? Identity. Legacy. This is the story of Isaiah Rivers and the racist judge who tried to destroy him until the boy's real identity shattered the courtroom and everything they thought they knew. The town of Briarwood was the kind of place where the paint peeled off brick buildings like forgotten promises. Where justice wasn't blind, it just wore tinted lenses. And on that summer morning in courtroom 2B, a storm wasn't brewing in the skies, but in the heart of a boy who refused to speak. 17-year-old Isaiah Rivers sat handcuffed at the defendant's table. Head down, shoulders tense, brown skin lit by the cold glare of a skylight. He hadn't said a word since the arrest. He didn't need to. The people had already decided who he was. A gangbanger, a thief, a liar, just another dangerous kid in a hoodie. Even though he wasn't, even though none of it was true. Judge Ronald Ashcroft, white, 62, sharp suit, sharper opinions, looked down at Isaiah like a king surveying a peasant. He had sentenced 25 black boys in the last 3 years. He didn't remember their names. To him, Isaiah was just one more. The evidence is overwhelming, Judge Ashcroft said, though it wasn't. The security footage was grainy. The witness recanted. And Isaiah's fingerprints were nowhere. But none of that mattered. Not to them. Isaiah's public defender, a tired man with overworked eyes, had done what he could, but without resources, without time, and against a system rigged from the start. It was like bringing a pebble to a landslide. And Isaiah? He just stared straight ahead. Silent. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he learned long ago no one listened. Before the arrest, Isaiah's world wasn't perfect, but it was his. He lived with his godmother, Miss Claudine, a retired nurse with a voice like velvet and a slap like thunder when needed. Isaiah didn't get in trouble. He got A's. He read Baldwin and built circuits from junk radios. He fixed people's phones for free. But in Briarwood, brilliance in black skin was either exceptionalized or ignored. Especially when you're quiet. Especially when you don't play the part. The night of the arrest, Isaiah had been biking home from the library. A robbery happened 2 blocks away. Wrong time, wrong place, wrong skin. He fit the description. Black male, late teens, hoodie, red shoes. Isaiah wore a hoodie. He owned red shoes. That was all it took. They tackled him face first into the concrete. They didn't ask questions. They didn't read rights. They just assumed. And when Isaiah asked why, they told him to shut up. That's when he stopped talking. Not from guilt, but from clarity. He'd been here before, not in cuffs, but in judgment. Judge Ashcroft didn't care about the truth. He cared about precedent. He cared about keeping his town safe. He sentenced Isaiah to 10 years. No parole. No rehabilitation. Just time. Hard, identity-shattering time. And the room? It stayed silent. Except for one gasp. From the back row, a man in a dark suit, eyes wide, stood up. His name was Carter Hale. No one knew who he was. But they would. Carter Hale wasn't just any man. He was a federal prosecutor. Not from Mississippi. From D.C. He wasn't there for the case. He was there for Isaiah. Because Isaiah Rivers wasn't just a boy from Briarwood. He was the adopted godson of the late Supreme Court Justice Elena Rivers. A quiet mentorship hidden from the world after her death, but documented in sealed files Carter carried in his hand. Photos, letters, scholarships, DNA test results. Judge Ashcroft stared, sweat blooming behind his collar. This couldn't be real, but it was. Isaiah Rivers wasn't a criminal. He was the sole heir of one of the most powerful legacies in modern legal history. And Carter? He had come to take him home. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. Not from awe, but shame. Everyone had seen Isaiah as a shadow, a statistic, a stereotype. Now, they were looking at him like a ghost, like something beyond their comprehension. But Isaiah? He just blinked, expressionless, like he'd known this moment might come, but never expected anyone to stand for him. Judge Ashcroft adjusted his robe, cleared his throat. This is highly irregular, he stammered. Carter Hale stepped forward, unapologetic. He placed the folder on the bench. Inside was proof, undeniable, federally stamped proof, that Isaiah Rivers had been under the legal guardianship of Justice Elena Rivers since age 10. After his mother died, Elena had funded his education anonymously per the boy's own wishes, so he wouldn't be treated differently, so he could grow as himself. Judge Ashcroft's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Her signature, bank transfers, a sealed mentorship file from the U.S. Supreme Court Office of Ethics. And at the bottom, a letter in her own handwriting. To whom it may concern, Isaiah Rivers is more than the sum of his skin color, upbringing, or silence. He is a mind that blooms in shadow, a heart that listens deeper than most ever speak. He is my greatest gift to the future of justice. Do not judge him by his quiet. That quiet will change the world. The words hit like thunder. A single tear rolled down Isaiah's cheek. Not because he was weak, but because someone had finally spoken for him, after all the years he couldn't speak for himself. Judge Ashcroft panicked. He asked the court clerk to pause the proceedings. But it was too late. The courtroom wasn't just filled with people. It was filled with truth. And truth spreads like fire when someone dares to strike the match. Carter Hale turned to the gallery. This courtroom has violated constitutional due process. He pointed directly at the judge. This boy was sentenced without credible evidence, detained with excessive force, stripped of dignity by a system too blind to see his worth. That ends today. The crowd gasped again. Reporters raced from the room. Isaiah just sat there, still silent, still unbroken. Years ago, on the coast of Maryland, Elena Rivers sat beside a 12-year-old Isaiah. She wore a scarf over her head from chemotherapy. He held a physics book on his lap. "You're going to be someone, Isaiah," she told him. "And when the world finally sees you, not your clothes, not your quiet, they'll realize they were blind. Promise me something." "What?" he whispered. "When they try to bury you, plant roots." Within hours, the story had exploded. Wrongfully sentenced teen revealed to be Supreme Court Justice's heir. The headlines roared. Videos of the trial went viral. Clips of Isaiah being tackled. Mugshots compared to honor roll photos. And the contrast was undeniable. The world watched. Some in shame. Some in disbelief. But most in awe. Because the quiet boy no one believed in wasn't just a victim. He was the storm after silence. 3 days later, Judge Ashcroft was summoned to a federal disciplinary hearing. Pattern of discriminatory sentencing. Negligence of due process. Racially biased conduct unbecoming of a federal officer. He tried to explain, tried to shift blame to officers, to lawyers, to community pressure. But the footage didn't lie. His words, his tone, his complete dismissal of Isaiah's humanity. It was all there, for everyone to see. His robe couldn't protect him anymore. A week later, Isaiah was invited to speak at a youth justice summit in Washington, D.C. He walked on stage, not in a hoodie, but in Elena's old blazer, tailored to fit. The crowd stood. He paused, looked out over them, and then, finally, he spoke. They thought my silence meant I had nothing to say. But silence can be louder than hate, louder than judgment, louder than ignorance. They sentenced a version of me that never existed. And now, I'm here to speak for every kid they never listened to. Not just because I can, but because I must. In a matter of days, Isaiah Rivers became more than a name. He became a movement. Social media erupted. Hashtags spread like wildfire. Hashtag justice for Isaiah. Hashtag quiet strength. Hashtag Ashcroft resign. Interviews played on every major network, though Isaiah only agreed to one. A quiet sit-down with a black female journalist who had once been arrested in that same town for disorderly conduct while walking her dog. She didn't sensationalize him. She listened. And when she asked what he wanted next, he didn't ask for revenge. He asked for reform. Back home in Briarwood, Miss Claudine stood in her kitchen, eyes closed, whispering a prayer over the stove. Lord, I don't know why you chose my boy for this. But thank you for keeping him. For giving him grace when I couldn't even give him hope. She held the letter Isaiah had written her from the holding cell, folded so many times the creases looked like scars. I don't blame you for crying that night, he'd written. I cried too. I just didn't let them see it. Meanwhile, the Briarwood police chief, under fire, under federal review, scrambled to save face. He scheduled a meeting with Carter Hale. Tried to apologize. Tried to make things right. But Carter didn't come for apologies. He came with a folder. Inside, a list of 27 cases over the past 5 years. All young black boys are arrested under suspicious conditions. Carter slid the folder across the desk and said, "You have 2 choices. Cooperate with federal oversight, or go down with the judge." The chief folded. They always do when the spotlight turns on. For Judge Ashcroft, the fall was steep. He'd lost his seat, his pension, his immunity. Now, he sat in a federal holding facility, writing a statement for a hearing he hoped would clear his name. But in his heart, he knew. He wasn't innocent. He wasn't the victim. He was the architect of a system that ate boys like Isaiah for breakfast. And now, he was just a footnote in the story of the one who survived him. 3 weeks after his name was cleared, Isaiah stepped out of the black SUV onto the cracked sidewalk of Briarwood. The air smelled the same, but something in it had shifted. People watched from porches. Some with shame. Some with pride. A little girl waved. He waved back. Then walked past the courthouse where they'd sentenced him. Head high. Not in spite of the town, but for it. He visited his old high school. The same halls where teachers once called him difficult, unmotivated, withdrawn. Now they asked for selfies. But he didn't come to bask. He came to speak. To a group of students who had already heard the rumors but never knew the boy behind the headlines. Isaiah stood before them and said, "If you feel invisible, I see you. If they told you to speak up, but never heard you, I hear you. Don't let their fear define your future. And don't wait for permission to matter." He remembered the first time it happened. He was 11. He'd walked into a hardware store with a $20 bill to buy glue for a science project. A white clerk called the police. Said he looked like he might try something. They searched his backpack. Found nothing. He cried that night not because he was scared, but because for the first time, he realized that being good wouldn't always be enough. With Carter's help and Elena Rivers' legacy fund, Isaiah started a nonprofit, the Quiet Uprising Foundation. Its mission? To support wrongly accused youth, provide free legal education, and train young people to know their rights before they ever need to defend them. They opened the first office in the old courthouse wing that once sentenced him. The irony was intentional. His name was Officer Dale Merrick, a 17-year veteran of the force. With clean record, 2 kids in college. And he was the one who'd slammed Isaiah's face into the pavement that night. He never apologized. Not in court. Not on camera. Not even when the truth came out. But now, 3 months later, he was called into a mandatory community review panel, part of the reform deals made after Judge Ashcroft's dismissal. And across the table sat Isaiah. The room went still when their eyes met. Not with hatred, but with reckoning. The moderator asked Isaiah if he had anything to say. He stood, measured, and said, "Do you remember what you said to me?" Officer Merrick shifted uncomfortably. Looked at the panel. Isaiah didn't flinch. "You said, I don't care who you are. You fit the profile. And you threw me on the ground like I was trash. So I want to ask you something now. Who do you think I am?" The officer didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he finally did. And it shamed him. The city announced it would review every arrest made by Officer Merrick in the past decade. 6 were already reopened. 3 young men, 2 of whom had spent time in prison, had stories eerily similar to Isaiah's. The system had a pattern, but now, that pattern was unraveling. Because Isaiah didn't just survive it, he challenged it. And more importantly, he gave others permission to speak. 6 months after the trial, Isaiah agreed to one final interview. It aired on a national stage. No script, no makeup, just a camera and the truth. The host asked him the question the whole country was waiting for. Do you forgive them? A long pause, longer than television allowed. But Isaiah took his time. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's refusing to carry what they tried to make you hold. So yes, I forgive them, but I will never let them forget what they did. A few weeks later, Isaiah showed up at a local school board meeting. A teacher who once labeled him emotionally withdrawn was up for promotion to assistant principal. He didn't come to shame her. He came to challenge the standard. Isaiah approached the mic, held up his old report card, and read the comment she'd written. Isaiah lacks motivation, appears disengaged, unlikely to succeed without behavioral intervention. Then, without raising his voice, he said, "That boy became a national speaker, founder of a legal foundation, and valedictorian in STEM. Not despite your belief in him, but without it." So ask yourself, how many other Isaiahs are you still failing? On the 1-year anniversary of Justice Elena Rivers' death, Isaiah returned to her grave. He brought no press, no camera, just himself, and a letter. He knelt beside the marble headstone, the same one he'd read beside as a boy, and whispered, "I kept the promise. I didn't let them bury me. I grew." He folded the letter, placed it under a smooth river stone, and walked away. Every Thursday night, Isaiah taught a free Know Your Rights workshop. For kids, for parents, for anyone who wanted to learn how to survive a stop, a courtroom, a stare. He didn't teach out of bitterness. He taught from preparation. Because he knew, if systems won't protect you, you learn to protect yourself. Outside the old courthouse where Isaiah was once sentenced, they painted a mural, 16 feet tall. His face was there. But beside it, names, dozens of them. Not of victims, but survivors. Each name was written by its owner. Each face drawn in the style of the city's youth artists. They called it the Legacy Wall. And at the bottom, in bold letters, read the quote, "You tried to bury me. You forgot I was a seed." One Sunday, Officer Merrick showed up at a small community church on the edge of town. He didn't ask to speak, but was invited to. He stepped up to the pulpit, hands trembling, eyes swollen. "I don't expect to be forgiven," he said, "but I need to repent. I didn't just arrest a boy. I upheld a lie. I let my fear decide for me, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to undo what that fear cost." The crowd was silent. Then Claudine, Ms. Claudine stood up from the third pew and said, "Then start with truth, and keep showing up." It came in a cream-colored envelope with a gold seal. No return address. Just one line printed in bold. From the office of the president. Inside, a formal invitation to the National Youth Justice Summit in Washington, D.C. Not just to attend, to keynote. Isaiah stared at the envelope for a long time. He wasn't used to being asked into spaces like that. He had always fought his way in. But now the world was listening. The night before he was set to leave for D.C., Isaiah heard a knock. He opened the door and froze. Marcus. His cousin. His former best friend. The one who'd cut him off after the arrest. Who believed the rumors. Who didn't visit once. They hadn't spoken in over a year. "I heard about the summit," Marcus said. "I wanted to say, I was wrong. I should have believed you." Isaiah didn't slam the door. But he didn't let him in either. Not yet. Because healing isn't a handshake. It's earned. The summit hall buzzed with energy. Young leaders, activists, educators. All waiting for the final keynote. And then Isaiah walked on stage. A tailored black suit. No script. Just a voice. He took the mic, looked across the sea of expectant eyes, and said, "I was sentenced before I ever spoke. Profiled before I ever stood trial. But what saved me wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't even justice. It was the truth, quiet, patient, and unmoving." He paused, then continued, If you're sitting in this room because you've been hurt by a system that was supposed to protect you, I see you. I was you. And together, we're going to rewrite the ending. But not everyone clapped. Some were watching from the shadows. An anonymous blog post appeared online 2 days later. Isaiah Rivers isn't who he claims to be. It accused him of exploiting his story, of being coached, manipulated, and funded by liberal elites. And worst of all, it claimed he exaggerated the abuse. No proof, just innuendo. But it spread fast. Because when a young black man stands tall, they will always look for ways to bring him down. He was invited onto a national panel to defend himself. The host smirked, subtly. "Isn't it convenient," they said, "that your silence became your brand?" Isaiah looked at the camera and didn't blink. "I didn't brand my trauma," he said. "You did. I didn't make myself a symbol. You did that when you ignored my truth until it hurt your reputation. But here's the thing. I'm not your symbol. I'm not your puppet. I'm not your redemption story. I'm a human being. And that should have been enough." That night, Isaiah found out who wrote the anonymous post. Marcus. His cousin. The one who had come back, apologized, tried to reconnect. He did it out of jealousy, out of pain, out of feeling like Isaiah's rise meant his own failure. And when confronted, all Marcus could say was, "I didn't think it'd go that far, Zay. I didn't think they'd listen." But they did. And now, Isaiah had to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. Isaiah didn't expose Marcus publicly, didn't cancel him, didn't fight dirty. He wrote him a letter and left it at his door. "I forgive you, but I can't carry you anymore. Heal. Do better." That's all I ever wanted from any of them. Later that week, Claudine sat Isaiah down at her kitchen table. No cameras. No headlines. Just love. "You tired, baby?" she asked. He nodded. "Then rest. But don't quit. You weren't called to comfort. You were called to cause good trouble." At the next Quiet Uprising Foundation event, Isaiah did something different. He gave the keynote and then stepped aside. Let others speak. Let their stories rise. Because the true sign of power isn't taking the mic. It's knowing when to pass it. A 16-year-old girl spoke about her father being deported. A boy from Texas shared how he'd survived solitary confinement at age 15. A young immigrant recited poetry about being criminalized for surviving. And Isaiah? He sat in the front row, hands clasped, eyes wet, because this was always the dream. Not to be the face of the movement, but to multiply it. Life lesson from this story. Even when the world sees you as less, you are never small. The truth always comes. And when it does, it doesn't knock, it breaks down the door. Are you thrilled by this story? Subscribe to Crime Files Uncovered for more exciting stories.